Today is September 11, 2025. 24 years ago, on this day, Saudi nationals have hijacked commercial airliners in this country for the sole intent to create fear and panic among the American people. They have done so by successfully hijacking these airplanes at knife point and have crashed them into important landmarks and symbols of this nation, with colliding of commercial aircraft in the World Trade Center over in New York City, New York, crashing an airplane into the Pentagon in the vicinity of Washington, D.C., as well as an attempt, while successful at hijacking the aircraft, to attempt and crash it into the United States Capitol building, only to be thwarted by the passengers and divert the airplane into a field in Pennsylvania. And with that, has created a huge turning point in this nation on the focus of global terrorism. Yet fast forward 24 years later, yesterday at around 12:20 local time, over at a university over in Utah, we have encountered a new form of domestic terrorism, where you have to focus on not just enemies abroad, but as well as those within our own borders. A man, Charlie Kirk, and the organization he founded, Turning Point USA, is an organization that bases itself on free speech in public spaces and with open discussion and debates with the public. Yet we can't exactly have a debate with the circumstances that I had yesterday, where a man, while on stage on a debate, ends up bleeding to death. An unknown assailant, still at large, armed with a rifle, shot Charlie Kirk in the neck in front of his wife and children, as well as thousands of people out in the public, with the intent to create intimidation and fear for political goals. A true case of terrorism right over here. And with that, he unfortunately went to the hospital in critical condition, and after that had died. That is extremely disturbing and quite abhorrent. And your reaction afterwards, other than people who state what has happened and the facts of what has happened, or prayers and condolences to his family, as well as his associates and supporters, there is cheerful celebration of hearing about his death, and with joy, spreading videos of him getting shot in the neck and bleeding out. I find that to be quite deplorable. Charlie Kirk, I disregarded and dismissed him, as well as other co-hosts of Turning Point USA, such as Ben Shapiro, for example, as a meme, but in hindsight, and being quite disturbed about this sudden outburst of violence amongst his detractors, I have to reevaluate what's going on, and I find it to be quite sickening, where that the avenue for peaceful speech and debate openly with the public is now uprooted through violence and force. And Charlie Kirk has had a statement on that, and a good quote. Now let him say it. He speaks it more articulately than me.
To our country is to find our disagreements respectfully, because when people stop talking, that's when violence happens.
I cannot say that more eloquently than what Charlie Kirk has said, and that without any sort of open and public space for debate, discussion, and speech, what is there left? Violence. And that is just what has been demonstrated where violence was enacted on Charlie Kirk in his willful killing in a public area for the use of speech. And we can see that being celebrated, not about Charlie Kirk's free speech, but about the violence done against him to silence him. And that is also true on the firearms media space from those on the far left, from individuals and entities and big major media figureheads. Let's take a look at Queer Armor, for example, on Blue Sky. Here we have, quote, "I do not want to encourage violence. I teach and encourage self-defense. Charlie Kirk wanted violence. He openly called for murdering me and mine, for violently assaulting us on the streets. He had blood on his hands and was eager to burn my community to the ground. I am glad that his work stopped." so queer armor cannot tell the difference between speech and violence. YZY Prince, who has attempted to do a false DC-made claim on Focus Trip's channel, has posted an Instagram story celebrating Charlie Kirk upon hearing that Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck. Then we have, for example, the discussion I have with two members from the Indiana Socialist Rifle Association on the Focus Trip livestream, where they're presented a question where if a generic conservative individual, such as Charlie Kirk, for example, should be allowed to keep and bear arms and have the natural right to self-defense. You know, like the statement 2A for all, the slogan of it. And the response by these members of the SRA say that no, he is not to be included in that sort of protection, and by extension, his right to exercise speech. Let's look at even further, speaking of 2A for all. A Better Way 2A on Instagram has posted a series of crab emojis. Now, for those who are unaware, that is a reference to the Rave Crab music video, a silly music video which shows dancing crabs that are 3D generated. However, used nowadays, most of the time this would be used in a celebration of a high-profile individual's death, and in this context, the fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk. Now, if we take a look at the post on Twitter from Better Way 2A, they said, unquote, "We want to be absolutely clear that we do not endorse or celebrate violence in any form. At the same time, we cannot ignore that years of spreading hatred, fueling division, and making a career out of dehumanizing others eventually come with consequences. When someone devotes their life to painting fellow Americans as enemies, it is only a matter of time before one of them reacts." Touche, A Better Way 2A. And look at the people you're going to celebrate. I'll get to that a bit later. Continuing on, Charlie Kirk built his platform on tearing people down. What we are seeing now is the inevitable result of that choice. We are not celebrating this, and we know that the consequences will reach all of us. But it is also a stark reminder of the hubris it takes to believe that you can act this way without repercussions. Above all else, our thoughts are with his family. We should never have to bear the weight of choices that were not their own. Basically a GPT-ass generated way of saying that, hey, we really don't like Charlie Kirk. And we blame him for him getting himself shot for exercising freedom of speech in a nonviolent way. And A Better Way 2A would support violent individuals, such as supporting the leader of the Doll Squad, Joseph Landeros, aka Mia Rose, who would deem anyone that is to the right of them, their perceived enemies, including Better Way 2A, as fascists, Nazis, and colonizers, and have set up all offensive Marxist death squads that, when given the opportunity to, will kill their own perceived enemies without giving them any sort of quarter, saying that Nazis go die, fascists have to die, and similar phrases. And these are the people that celebrate Charlie Kirk's death. And if these sorts of individuals that I have mentioned want a generic milquetoast conservative dead and cheer for his own violent and fatal death on a public sphere just for engaging in speech, imagine how they would cheer for you. And that's extremely disturbing. And the message and pattern is becoming more and more clear. The far left views that our own speech is violence, and they view their own violence as speech. And in the context of domestic terrorism, this is becoming more and more of a pattern. For example, you have the 2019 member of the Puget Sound John Brown Gun Club, Willem von Spronsen, who, armed with a rifle, homemade explosives, and firebombs, attacked the Tacoma Detention Center, run by ICE. You have Doll Squad. You have Benjamin Song's Antifa cell, based in Dallas, and have attacked a Pearland ICE detention facility. you have individuals that would shoot children in their own churches and schools and be cheered on for it. And this is becoming more and more of a disturbing pattern, and one where, as unfortunately what has happened yesterday, that debate and speech peacefully in a public forum cannot resolve, and that the only language that the far left would engage in, the only dialogue they would engage in, and the only language they understand and speak is in fact violence. The flag, which is against the wall and held together with tape, is a good metaphor for where our country is presently and where it will be in the future, where individuals from within our own country want to go and destroy the ultimate law, which protects and safeguards our ability to have free speech, the right to defend ourselves, and all these other natural and unalienable rights. The ones which are enforced by the Constitution of this country. We have our own speech be silenced by people who want to do violence and kill us. We have individuals who want to obtain arms for the sole purpose of destroying the United States Constitution. Let's take a look at the Minnesota chapter of the SRA, for example, the Socialist Rifle Association, where they say specifically, the Second Amendment is not and has never been for everyone. It was specifically crafted to empower landed whites to crush slave rebellions and kill the indigenous, historically oppressed peoples who are today armed and are allowed to do so in spite of the Second Amendment, not because of it. And above all, this is just a bunch of liberal nonsense. Fuck the 2A. We're not in favor of guns for everyone. We're in favor of arming those groups who stand most to gain from the end of capitalism and disarming those who stand in our way. And if that quote isn't the embodiment of the people who celebrate Charlie Kirk's death, then what isn't? And while I cannot impress upon you about what you should or shouldn't do, or who you should listen or not listen to, it would behoove upon you to act accordingly and start preparations if you haven't done so already. Stock up on shelf-stable food, potable water, medical supplies, and learn how to use them. Fire suppression things such as fire extinguishers if you haven't had them already in your vehicle, your room, your kitchen, and your workspace. And help uplift your community, whether it be your neighbors, your friends, your church. Help them out and be a contributing member of it. Learn how to operate, especially a concealable handgun, be proficient with it, and learn how to use it and stockpile on ammunition for it. And once you're able to have your basics be covered, it wouldn't help to get yourself one of these. Because domestic terrorism in this country and other kinetic events which may target you and be cheered on if something bad happens to you will happen. And I'm afraid is that when things get worse, more and more kinetic problems would happen, and at this point, speech is no longer an option, and the only language that is being spoken out there by our enemies is violence. And unfortunately, we have to retort back with kinetic avenues instead of diplomatic ones. So, what are some resources to look into for that, for preparation? I have plenty of stuff in my own catalog, and I don't want to make this about myself or toot my own horn. Security Guy 42 has a great dialogue and backlog of information to look into and support him out financially. He's in a pretty tight spot right now in a financial level. Unfortunately, I'm pretty tied up on that sort of area, so I'm not able to provide assistance for myself. The very least I could do is just spread the message. And don't listen to people that would just say nonsense while only saying stuff from the seat of their car, have AI-generated thumbnails, or claim to be a leader of a 2-bit militia that is ended up in abject failure and imprisonment or death. But our own enemies out there, people I've been keeping tabs on, have elevated standards for equipment, for proficiency, and for training, for the purpose of wanting the death and demise of you. So prepare and act accordingly. And last message I would have to say, thoughts, prayers, and condolences for Charlie Kirk's family, his associates and peers at Turning Point USA, and If I do find a way to financially support them, especially Kirk's family, I'll have it down in the video link and in the description down below. Otherwise, thank you for listening to my own speech, published on September 11, 2025. While the actual shooter is still at large and many of the details are still unclear, the tragic death of Charlie Kirk, the death of speech in America in a peaceful manner in a public space, and increasing celebration of violence and demise by the far left, we're reaching a new turning point. Act accordingly. And if this video gets demonetized, I don't fucking care.